Welcome to Tracing Individuals by Place, presented by New South Wales State Archives. Why would we want to trace someone by place? Perhaps you've all had trouble finding someone. You go to the indexes and you simply cannot find them. Perhaps the name has been misspelt. Perhaps you're looking for a popular name that's just too popular and there are too many people of that name, or all you found is a name and an initial, and the place will help to identify that it is the person you're trying to find. Do remember, not all records are indexed by individuals' names, so sometimes knowing the area or the town in which a family lived or worked, you may be able to find some additional information. You may not exactly be sure of specific details. You may just have a family story and you know that one member of the family was involved, but you're not particularly sure which one. So by looking for place, it allows you to put things into context and to see what you can find. You may also just want to get a feel of a particular place and time, and you may be interested in finding even a passing mention of your family. So first of all, define your area. Define the time frame for the people to be included. Find out some background information about the area. How was the government involved in this area? Which government agencies would have been involved? And are there any surviving records? And do remember that communities are made up of people and individuals. New South Wales finding aids. We have collection search, which is our online catalogue. We have our online indexes, which can be searched by place in many instances, and research A to Z, which has our information fact sheets. Some of you may remember when they were archives in brief. It is information based on particular topics. All these things can help you to find information. I'm not going to give a seminar on how to use the website. There is a webinar on how to use the website for those that would like to, but I would just like you to be aware of where things are on our website. So you'll see under quick links, we have online indexes, research A to Z. So when I'm saying to you, check the online indexes, I'm suggesting that's where you go. Or if I say research A to Z, go to research A to Z and then to the particular topic of interest, such as L for local history. When I say to use collection search, you're to use the search box. You can see that the rectangular box in the middle of the screen. If I suggest using advanced search, then advanced search is just underneath the search box. If we go into our online indexes, you will find the online indexes are arranged alphabetically, A to W. You will also find the same alphabetical sequence if you go into research A to Z. So for example, if you were looking for schools, you'd go to S and it would give you information about school records that we hold. Back on our website, if you're going into advanced search, you go to the advanced search, which is under the large search box. And when you go into advanced search, you can search under entities. You can choose, the main ones to choose would be series, item, or government agency, or you may want to search by number. So I may be referring to those search tools in the course of our talk. To begin with, I'd like to start with the Colonial Secretary's correspondence. The Colonial Secretary's papers, 1788 to 1825, does have an online index. There are also contemporary indexes that were used at the time in the Colonial Secretary's office from 1826 onwards, and that's available on microfilm in our reading room. The late Joan Rees has done the wonderful index New South Wales Colonial Secretaries in Letters, indexed 1826 through to 1895. And also don't forget to check special bundles on New South Wales State Archives website. Go to Research, A to Z, and then to Special Bundles. Special bundles have not been indexed. That's where a lot of correspondence on a particular topic has been brought together for convenience. If we were to go into Joan Rees's index, it's now available on CD-ROM, and you can search by place. Oftentimes, with a popular name such as Smith, you probably need all the help you can get. And by putting in a place name, it may help you to narrow down your search. For example, you can see D. Smith in the middle of the screen, and with the place name of Carcoar and knowing he's the clerk at Carcoar, that would help you to identify that it was your particular family and that's the item that you would like to see. You may also want to search by a place when you keep in mind that where there are more than 20 names on a particular letter or petition, Joan Rees did not index those individual names. So, for example, the memorial of the inhabitants of Eden concerning roads, concerning petty sessions, and so it goes on. So if you know that your family was in Eden at a particular time, you may want to see if they were one of the inhabitants that signed the memorial or the petition asking or requesting a particular item from the government. Now, you may also want to look at parish maps. They're a wonderful source of information, and we'll have more on parish maps as the course goes on. Do keep in mind with land records, I can't possibly list all the land records and finding aids that are available to them. I simply want to give you a good overview so that you can think, yes, I may like to try that. For example, the Surveyor General's Select List of Maps and Plans, 1792 to 1800, has an online index, and you simply go to M for Maps and Plans. In the early days, if you look at maps that show allotments, allotments often mention the name of the person who was holding that particular allotment. Don't forget, you can also search Surveyor's Records. There's letters that you can search by place, sketchbooks, and of course field books. There's also the index to maps and plans in our reading room, which is a card index, and that's a separate index to the Surveyor General's index to maps and plans. We also have an online index to land grants, 1792 to 1865. And you may want to search land by license, the occupation of land by particular areas. In collection search, you may want to search by the Crown Land Agent for a particular area. And don't forget the Land Titles Office, now New South Wales Land Registry, for deeds and titles, and you can look at those on the Historic Records Viewer. There's also primary application packets and conditional purchase records and other records such as soldier settlement. And many of these land records you can approach by a particular area. So if you're having trouble finding it by an individual's name, if you know the area where they were, this may help you. This is just an example of some of the online indexes that we have to land records, and they can, of course, be searched by place. Primary applications were the procedure under which land was converted to Torrens title. Originally, land was held by chain of title, and when someone sold some land, they had to produce all the previous titles to show how the land had come to them. With the Real Property Act in January of 1863, Torrens title was introduced. And keep in mind, where many people can't find the primary application, it's because it's under the name of the owner or owners who converted the title. Your ancestor may have owned that land previously, but they may not have been the person who converted the title. The primary application packets contain fantastic information and include survey plans, correspondence, working papers, examiners' reports, draft certificate of title, caveats against adjoining owners, and title deeds. They may also include unregistered deeds, full copies of deeds prior to 1844, and this is where you may find your particular ancestor, statutory declarations, births, deaths and marriage certificates, wills, valuations and leases. The best way to find a primary application packet is to start with the primary application number, and this is available from the New South Wales Land Registry and would usually be shown on the land or title deed to that land. Sometimes it can be shown on parish maps for larger areas, and once you have that primary application number, you can search by the primary application number in collection search, in which case choose the advanced search. For more information on primary applications, see research A to Z and go to P for primary applications. If you have the primary application number and you go to advanced search, you can just search by number. If you just put in the PA number, if you put in PA, for example, 18511, you do the search and there you will see the results showing in the bottom of the screen in red, and then you can then look at the primary application itself and the primary application packet, and they contain wonderful information, and there you can see the primary application packet. For parish maps, what you need to look for are numbers that may lead on to something. So, for example, with conditional purchase records, you would be looking for a CP number. You can see in the middle of the screen under Charles Law, CP 8652. Write that number down. Next to that, to the right, you can see C Law, CP 87-58. With that information, we can then search the conditional purchase records. So conditional purchase records, we do have an index on microfiche covering the years 1862 to 65 in our reading room. We have the numbers that are given on the parish map appear as CP for conditional purchase. ACP means an additional conditional purchase. NRCP, non-residential conditional purchase. And these numbers can then be looked up in NRS 8109 conditional purchase registers 1862 to 1911. That's the main series of conditional purchase registers that we hold. You may then follow through in the registers and you may lead on to files such as conditional sales files where you will find additional information. But you may also want to have a look just at a particular area where you know that your family held land. You may not be able to find a conditional purchase number, or you may not be sure of how the land was held. And that's where it's a good idea to search by place. For example, you could just put in Yass Lands Office, and there you can see a whole host of records that are simply arranged by the Yass area. You can scroll down, and then if it wasn't conditional purchase, you may want to see, was the land held under an annual lease? Was it a special lease? or a suburban holdings register, and many more. So they show you the date range and you can decide how much time you want to spend searching. There's also soldier settlement. Our wonderful volunteers have indexed many of the soldier settlement records, and the soldier settlement indexes are able to be searched by place. So if you're not sure which member of the family may have held a soldier settlement, you may just want to search by a place. So, for example, in the index to the closest settlement promotion files, I've searched by Nowra, and it will give you all the entries for Nowra, and you can go through and look for your particular person. In this instance, it's Merton Alfred Hyman. And many of you from the Nowra area may have heard of Hyman's Beach. So you may like to have a look at the file. And here we have one of the examples of the documents in the file describing the land as being suitable for the running of dry cows and young cattle, or dairy could be carried for a 6-month period each year. It may also include things like a plan of the area showing the land that's the subject of the particular file. So when we go on, we think, what are the special features of a particular area? Now, the special features may help us to find additional information on your particular family. Was it a coast or port area? Were there shipwrecks in the area? Was it a dairying area? Was it famous for timber or mining? Were there famous incidents, accidents, or people who would have been in the area? What is unique about your area? And you may be able to use this information to find information on your family. See also Research A to Z, L for local history, and it will list a lot of records about which you may find information. Do keep in mind that records that I can just mention in the course of this webinar are simply the tip of the iceberg. I simply hope that you will find the principles that I mention, apply them, and you will find records for your own particular place or area. For example, you may know that your ancestors were involved in helping with a particular shipwreck. In this case, I put in Shindara, which was a shipwreck that took place at Tweed Heads, and there is a report on it. You may want to look up and read that information and see if your family were mentioned. In advanced search, you may want to search by a place. So I've put in, for example, under entities, I've chosen series, and for the title, I've put in Twofold Bay. And this will give me a list of series that you can see in red, giving you the date ranges. You can read through them and see if your ancestors that were in Twofold Bay or Eden may be mentioned in those particular records. Do keep in mind that most of these series would not be indexed, so it would mean that you would have to come into the reading room and sit and read through a particular volume. You may want to just put in a district and do a search. For example, Marundi. We have a register of dairymen and milk vendors in the Marundi district from 1899 through to 1909. And just to show you the type of information that you're likely to find. Yes, Miss Mary Hunt is described as a dairyman. And it does give you information about her dairy, that it was clean and it was in good condition. That is just one example of a very specialized record for an area that would not be indexed. You would only be able to find that information by searching by place. Mining is something that most families have someone that they know was mining. We have an online index to registers of auriferous leases. And auriferous leases simply mean to gold leases. So you may want to search our online index. Yes, you can search by name, but you can also search by area. It includes some of the registers of leases, and they will be by particular areas. There's more than those listed on our screen in front of you. You can see a full listing under Research A to Z, and go to G for gold mining. It will also tell you which registers are indexed and included in our online index and which registers haven't been indexed. When you find an entry, you would then go to the register, and there you can see that they will usually record the application number, the applicant's name, the type and term of lease, the locality, the extent and description of land, the date of the survey and surveyor's name, and may include a sketch plan, record of payments, rents, and remarks, including cancellations. Federation. You might say Federation is over and done with, all the celebrations for the centenary. But do keep in mind that the records relating to Federation may contain information about your particular ancestor. We have a guide to Federation records in our reading room, and in our digital galleries we also have the quest to be the capital, Canberra, which finally won it, of course. There's correspondence and minutes of evidence of proceedings of the Royal Commission on sites for the seat of government of the Commonwealth. The evidence was taken between 1899 and 1902. It's arranged alphabetically by place, and there are more places than just those showing on the screen that put their hand up to say that they'd like to be the capital of Australia. The information is purely approachable by place. So if, for example, you know that one of your ancestors was, say, for example, in this case, Armidale, you may want to see if they gave evidence to say why that particular town would make a great Australian capital. In this instance, on your screen, you can see William Marshall Harris, who's the manager of the Bank of New South Wales at Armidale, and he has kept temperature records for the government astronomer. It gives you great detail about his hobby of keeping temperature records and his interest in the area, and that information would be shown nowhere else. There's also Charles Albert Jarks, who was an orchardist near Armidale, and we know from his testimony that he had actually been to Tasmania, so that might be something that you wouldn't find anywhere else. So do have a look. If you know that your family were in a particular town that was interested in becoming the capital of Australia, you may find that one of the members gave evidence at the hearings as to why that particular place would make a great capital. Don't forget the census records. Yes, censuses are arranged alphabetically, I know, but what about if the name was misinterpreted or misspelt? You can approach them by place. The 1828 census is now available on CD-ROM, and you can manipulate it by town or place. There's the 1841 census. We have an online index on our website, and you can search by locality. And the census for 1891 and 1901 are available on ancestry.com, and many libraries offer free access to Ancestry. So just in case a name has been misinterpreted or misspelt, you may like to search by place. And for example, this is the 1891 census for Mudgee, and this was the collector's book for the Chinese inhabitants of Mudgee at the time, and the government actually employed a Chinese collector. So we know that names that often cause problems when they're anglicised, you may like simply to browse through and see if you can find your particular person. Don't forget electoral rolls. See Research A to Z. On Ancestry, you will find our electoral rolls from 1842 to 64, and then there's selected years up to 1980. Keep in mind, after 1864, the electoral rolls are held by the State Library of New South Wales. And for those years that haven't been digitised and indexed on Ancestry, they are arranged by electorate. So if you did want to undertake that sort of search, you would be searching by a place in the first instance, the electorate, and then by your particular person's name. Don't forget government publications. New South Wales government gazettes are now available on Trove, as is the New South Wales Police Gazettes up to 1930. And public service lists are available on ancestry.com. Now, you're probably all saying, but Gail, all of these are alphabetically arranged. But keep in mind, sometimes we're not always sure of a person's name and we need to look at it by place. You may, for example, in this example of the public service list, you may be looking for the mining warden at Edelong, or you may be looking, someone in the family, there may be a family story that someone married the mining warden at Gulgong and you're not quite sure of their name. So if you know the period of time, you could certainly look at these type of sources to try and find the information. Alternatively, it may simply be that you're trying to read the signature of a government official. And if you check the public service books, their signature may become clear. Law and order. Don't forget police records, police local records. A lot of them have not survived prior to the 1960s. There wasn't an Archives Act until 1960. But you can always check and see what we have. There's also police gazettes. Do keep in mind that occurrence pad entries and other records are created by local police stations where individuals' details are given do have a 100-year closure on them. Court records, you may want to look at the local court level and see if your ancestors are mentioned. Courts of Petty Sessions went on to become, of course, local courts, and the local courts also handle licensing records. You may need to check Quarter Sessions or Supreme Court records on circuits. And keep in mind, you may have to look a bit further afield into the surrounding area. Our online index to jail photographs, while it can be searched by person's name, it can also be searched by birthplace. And if you're doing a local history or looking for up some distant cousins, you may find that the birthplace option is certainly worth your while. Now, local court records, they do license various people such as auctioneers, hawkers, and other licenses. This is an example on your screen from Bathurst. The register covers the period of time 1865 to 1957, and you can see that there's various hawkers licenses being shown and auctioneers licenses. There's also, of course, the situation where they're not indexed, and you would need to narrow down your period of time and then look through the relevant register. Unfortunately, registers of various licenses at the local courts have not survived for all local courts. So you would have to see if there was something, the area in which your ancestors were living and working. This is another example. This is from Parks, and this covers the period of time 1912 through to 1920. And there you can see people being registered for Sunday trading. And so if your ancestors were in Parks and they had a business such as a restaurant in that particular period of time, you may find that they were granted a license to trade on a Sunday. The index to jail photos, as I said, can be searched by a particular birthplace. So in this case, I just put in casino and it will return those people who are listed as having casino as their birthplace. Public buildings. Now you may think, oh, what would a public building have to do with my family? We have various records relating to public buildings, such as files relating to the licensing of theatres and public halls, inspections of theatres and public halls by the Board of Fire Commissioners in country districts. Those two series have been entered into collection search, so you could just put in the name of the theatre or the particular public hall, and hopefully if we have a reference you could come in and go through it and see it. We also have an online index to the government architect's files concerning erection, repair and additions and alterations to public buildings 1837 to 1912. So if your ancestors were involved, you may well find them. This is an example from the Theatres and Halls licenses. This is for Patterson Pictures, and you'll see that the name of the licensee was Leonard James Rose. And so you could look through that file and see what other information you could certainly find. Business records, of course, can be arranged by area or place. We have documents lodged under the Companies Act 1875 to 1975, and they're arranged by the name of the company. We have the registers of firms 1903 to 22, and that has an online index which you can search both by name and by town or place. I've mentioned hawkers and other licenses under Courts of Petty Sessions, and there's also the insolvency and bankruptcy index online, and that of course can be searched by place. So if you were doing a local history, you may want to know all the people that were bankrupt in a particular town in a particular period of time. If you're searching under the series documents lodged under the Companies Act, and that's series 12951, if you go to the description of the series and then you scroll down, you will see that there's a search for items in this series. I simply put in the word Gosford, and then it will list the various companies that we have company packets for in that particular area. Because I know sometimes when we're doing a family history, we may know that one of our ancestors had a particular business, but we may not know what the name of the business was. So you could certainly see those records. Do keep in mind, though, that they are the documents that were required by the New South Wales government. They're not the personal records created by the particular company. So it would be if you were if your ancestor was one of the owners or one of the shareholders or operators or a fairly senior position in the company, then you might find information on that particular person. With the registers of firms, you can search by place. I searched by Howell in this particular instance. For those of you that know Howell, it's now a ghost town, but you may want to see what businesses were operating in its heyday when it was up and running. The insolvency index, you can also search by place. In this particular index, I just put in the word for the locality as being Patterson, and up came the return for Patterson River. We can then go in to the particular insolvent, in this case Charles Drinkwater, and there are of course a whole file of records. But what I wanted you to take notice of in tracing an individual by place, you might say, oh no, my family didn't go bankrupt or they weren't insolvent. But you may find, and I challenge you to do this, did your ancestors send someone else bankrupt? You can see the insolvents, creditors and claimants, and go through and see if your particular ancestor is mentioned in someone else's file. Hotels and publicans' licenses are always a popular source of information. We have an index to publicans' licenses on our website covering the period of time 1830 to 61, and you can search that by place. The publicans' licenses were printed up in the government gazettes between 1866 and 1922. They're arranged by police licensing district, and that's now available on Trove. In our reading room, we have a card index to publicans' licenses, 1920 to 37, which is arranged by district. We also have files related to terminated publicans' licenses, 1920 to 43, also arranged by district. And of course, our hotel plans, 1884 to 1959, arranged by the sign or the place, and they, of course, have been listed in collection search on our website. And for those of you that do have publicans in the family, the records of the Tooths Hotel, arranged by hotel, are held by the Noel Butland Archives of Labour and Business in Canberra. Local council generate records, and as Professor Ian Jack has said, the records generated by local councils are full of information about people of all stations in their life, their housing, their natural environment, their streetscape, their leisure, their essential services, their gripes and aspirations. These records are also the prime source of information about the council itself, its aldermen or its councillors, its paid officials, its elections, and its effectiveness in debate and in action. So some of the most popular local government records that we hold would be the minute books of the council meetings and, of course, the rate books. There is the published book by Joy Hughes, Local Government, Local History, a guide to New South Wales local government minute books and rate records. It was published in 1990, so some of the records that are listed may not be where the book says they are. Some may now be with us, but we can certainly search for those types of records and let you know. But some councils, of course, have maintained their own records, and if we don't hold the records of the particular local government, then you would need to contact the council itself. We also have a series of card register of municipal and shire council representatives, 1908 to 41. So there may be a family story that one of your family were the mayor of somewhere or other, or they were on the local council, and that may help you to find them. If you're after the records of a particular council, put in the name of the municipality that you're after or the particular shire. In this case, I simply put in Balmain. We do on our website have an administrative history, and if you scroll down underneath, you'll see the various records that we hold for that particular council. What a lot of people like to look at are the rate books because they will mention individuals. Keep in mind that with the rate books, it is by area and often down to a riding or a ward in a particular council. With the rate books, you may find that for each rateable property, a record was created, generally identifying the property and the person rated, and includes details of the annual value of the property, the amounts due, amounts paid, any arrears, and when the rates were abandoned. A complete rate may comprise two parts. There may be a rate book and a valuation book. So the valuation book book would generally identify the properties and the persons rated, and the rate book comprises the accounting details. So just keep that in mind to look when you're looking at council records. Just be aware of the different types of records available. So here's an example of a page from the rate book for the municipality of Balmain for the year 1925, and it is the Southeast Ward. I've mentioned the card register that we have of the municipal and shire council representatives, 1908 to 41, and this is how it's arranged. In this instance, you can see for this card, if you look sideways, it's arranged by the municipality of Nowra, and then it lists the mayor and the various aldermen. And so in that case, you could look through and see if your particular family member was listed. You may be interested in locating council records in other repositories, for example, records that we don't have. The City of Sydney Council Archives, they have a fantastic website, and they look after the records not only created by the Council of the City of Sydney, but also the records of other councils that have been absorbed by the City of Sydney Council. Other council archives, and these are just some examples, Parramatta, Marrickville and Hurstville all have archivists that look after their records. And here's a page from the City of Sydney Council Archives website. And of course, this is showing records that they have concerning Newtown. Valuation records created by the Valuer General to give a valuation on a particular property. Go to Research, A to Z, and then to L for Land Valuation Guide, and you'll see the records that we hold. For the various item lists, we also have a valuation folder in our reading room to make it easier to navigate the item list that you're looking for on a particular place and time. So here from the valuation guide, we can see the main series of records, the valuation cards and the valuation rolls. They vary slightly over time, but generally they'll record information as to the value of the property and generally a basic description of the property. Some will give more. The item listings for these are arranged by the particular valuation district. In this case, we're looking at Ku-ring-gai, and then within that, it's arranged by the various wards and then alphabetically by street. I was looking for Macintosh Street, so I went from Loftburg Avenue to Rosebery Street, and then, of course, I was able to come across the card for Erraldine. Many of you may know Erraldine, the historic house owned by Professor Waterhouse, who was the great authority on camellias and for the famous Camellia Garden. So Erraldine is 17 Macintosh Street. And there you can see the basic information. You can see Professor Waterhouse's name. And when you go to the back of the card, you will see the valuation given for the property. Education records. Of course, this is what all families all seem to want to know, more information about when their families were at school. And many of you have heard about the school files, which are the administrative files for a particular school. And we do have an online index arranged by school name. The school files start about 1875. Prior to that, you need to look under the Board of National Education and the denominational school boards records for the period of time 1848 to 66, and then the Council of Education records 1866 to 1880. Keep in mind the correspondence series in those earlier records are usually arranged on an annual basis and then alphabetical. The school files were artificially created and make it much easier to look at the records of a particular school. The only school record that mentions every single person enrolled at a particular school are the admission registers. We also have punishment books for people who did get into trouble. Keep in mind the admission registers are open to public access after 30 years, whereas the punishment books have a longer closure and they're open after 50 years. If you check our online index to schools, just search by the school name. We also have school photographs in NRS 15051. The individuals are generally not identified. You just need to search by the school name in collection search and then look at the particular images. For the school files, the admin files, you may find information about the building of the school, the setting up of the school, and you may, of course, find nice plans of the school. You may find information about particular teachers or pupils. In this case, a pupil teacher whose father wrote in asking that she be moved closer to home, to be removed from Shell Harbour School to Kiama School so that she could be much closer to her family. Now, in the school files, there's no focus on individual pupils, but sometimes you may find a list of arrears of school fees that have not been paid, or sometimes when they're setting up the school, the parents may send in a list of pupils who are willing to be taught. It may also include a mud map of the area showing where houses are in relation to the school. In this particular case, you can see for Patterson, you can see the Patterson River flowing by, and you can see where the houses and the families are. For many schools where we do have this mud map, it is a treasure trove because it may be the only map showing where particular families lived at a particular period of time. The admission registers provide good information. They give the pupil's name, their age, their religious denomination, and the names of their parents or guardians, and the occupation of the parent or guardian, and often the outcome of the schooling. Did the person go on to further education? Did they take up an occupation? What happened to them? Or did they transfer to another school? There's also health and safety records that may be of use to you. One series that I always think is very much overlooked is series NRS 4858, the sanitary inspection files covering 1897 to 1964. And they are arranged by town or place. And we also have some registers of private hospitals, 1910 to 28. And I'll just show you some examples. This is the item list from the sanitary inspection files. As you can see, it is arranged by shire or municipality, and it gives you a description of what the sanitary inspectors were investigating at the particular time. For example, the hotels were being investigated in Armidale in 1932 to 34, and so it goes on. You may also keep in mind that when we go on to the registers of private hospitals, these are where a private hospital is registering with the government. So they do need to give the names of the person who is the licensee of the hospital and the person who will be the manager of the hospital. So oftentimes a matron or someone who's a nurse in your family may be listed in one of these. Do keep in mind it is purely a register of the private hospitals. It is not the records of the private hospital itself. Photographs, always a wonderful source to illustrate our family histories. And of course, many group shots do not identify individuals by name. You can always search collection search by town or workplace or school and see what you can find. Keep in mind that with the school photographs that we have, it is not a complete collection of all class photographs. The school photos that we have came to us from the history unit of the Department of School Education in the days when there was a history unit to write up booklets for the school centenaries and anniversaries. So they were often simply photos that were donated at the time when those booklets were being written. Now, if you're searching for Coffs Harbour and you know that one of your relations worked in the railway refreshment room, you can see this beautiful photograph taken of the staff in July of 1947. So if you know that your auntie worked in the railway refreshment room at Coffs Harbour in 1947, you may be able to pick her out. But keep in mind, we do not have a list of names of the people in the photographs. You may also look at something like the apprentices in the carriage workshops at Everleigh. I did have a lady who actually was able to pick out her brother in the photograph. So if you know the family well, you may well be able to pick out a relation. And with, of course, the school photographs, put in the name of the school, and you may be lucky. If you know that your ancestor or family member was in class 2A at DY Public School in 1946, you may be able to pick them out in the photograph. And now, as we come to the end of our talk, we have some other sources which may help you. Post office files are arranged by town and they're held by the National Archives of Australia. So if you have a family member who is the postmistress or the postmaster in a particular town, you may want to check out the post office files held by the National Archives of Australia. Don't forget to check newspapers and local newspapers on Trove, and of course private papers may be held by libraries, local historical societies, or may still be in private hands. And do not overlook the local studies section of the regional library where your ancestors lived. They often have fantastic resources, sometimes including oral histories, so you may even be able to hear your ancestors' voice. And don't forget published books. Local histories are often a good adjunct to family history. People have often done extensive research to write a local history, and your family may simply be mentioned in passing. But always check your sources. Just because it's printed, don't accept it as fact until you have checked that source as well. So here endeth our seminar or our webinar on tracing an individual by place. There's a lot more records in our collection that you can approach by town or place or district. So I hope that I've opened up your minds to the possibilities and that you will try some of the sources that I've suggested, but there's also many, many more to be discovered.